right to make those comparisons. It's completely different. And the Prime Minister said yesterday, I think almost in the same breath, talked about the diverse country that we are and that being part of our strength.
I'm not saying it is Enoch Powell. I'm saying, did he know? Yeah. Did his speechwriters know? Did you know that he was echoing Enoch Powell?
I don't know. I didn't.
And are you uncomfortable with it?
You know, everybody always gets caught up in focusing on different phrases and so on, but we do have to be talking about the policies.
Cooper Borkins Gambai, Britain's high-stakes bombshell. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. British Connors delivers a political analysis that cuts through the noise. Hit that button, because what I'm about to tell you shows exactly why this government is scrambling, and you'll want to be here when the next chapter unfolds. Right, let's talk about Yvette Cooper's latest move, because it's revealing in ways that might not be immediately obvious. The Foreign Secretary is hosting European allies at Hillsborough Castle, that storied venue where the Good Friday Agreement was hammered out, and she's bringing together representatives from Albania, Serbia, North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, France, Germany, and Italy. The agenda? Immigration, crime, and security in the Western Balkans. But here's what makes this fascinating. This isn't just diplomacy theater. This is a government publicly admitting that its current approach to the small boats crisis is failing spectacularly, and is now throwing money and diplomatic capital at a problem that's spiraling beyond its control. Let's examine the numbers first, because they are damning. 34,401 small boat arrivals this year. We're on track to break the record for most arrivals in a single year. Read that again. Record-breaking numbers. And the much-touted one-out migration deal with France that was brokered earlier this year, 18 people returned. 18 out of over 34,000. That's not a policy success. That's statistical noise. That's a rounding error dressed up as governance. So when Cooper stands up at Hillsborough Castle announcing £14 million in funding, you have to ask yourself, is this a genuine strategic pivot? Or is this a government desperately searching for anything that might stem the tide before the public's patience runs out completely? The Western Balkans connection is crucial here, and it's worth understanding why this region matters so profoundly. According to the Foreign Office's own figures, the Western Balkans accounted for almost 22,000 irregular border crossings into the European Union last year. It's a key transit route, a corridor through which migrants flow toward Western Europe and ultimately toward Britain. The logic, then, is straightforward. Disrupt the supply chain at source. £10 million is being earmarked specifically for schemes tackling people smuggling in the Western Balkans and other key regions. Another $4 million is designated to combat Russian threats that are, in the government's words, aimed at destabilizing the region and fanning ethnic tensions. Now, here's where it gets rather interesting. Cooper is explicitly linking migration control with broader geopolitical security, weaving together the narrative that Russian interference, ethnic instability, and people smuggling networks are all part of the same tangled web that threatens British interests. There's something quite clever about this framing, actually. By positioning the Western Balkans as both a migration pressure point and a theater of Russian malign influence, Cooper elevates the issue beyond simple border control. It becomes about national security. It becomes about standing with European partners against shared threats. It becomes about Britain playing a leadership role in a region that perpetually teetering on the edge of instability. The optics are strong. Britain as a responsible international actor. Britain as a nation that understands complex, interconnected threats. Britain as a country willing to invest in every level. What does that actually mean? His brother Gurpreet is asking the same question, and frankly, he deserves a better answer than the diplomatic equivalent of thoughts and prayers. Gurpreet's holding on to hope that decisive steps are being taken behind the scenes, but is also painfully aware that every previous government has failed his brother. So when Sir Keir insists he hasn't in the slightest forgotten Jagta's case during this trade mission, forgive me for wondering whether that translates into anything more than a brief mention in a private conversation, easily brushed aside when the really important stuff, the trade figures, the investment commitments, the economic potential, takes center stage. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody in Downing Street wants to acknowledge. This visit, these posters, this grand trade mission, it's all built on a foundation of carefully managed moral compromises. We need India's market. We need their investment. We need those 7,000 jobs and that $4.8 billion annually. And so we'll downplay the Russia question. We'll raise concerns about detained British citizens just enough to say we did, but not so forcefully that it jeopardizes a deal. We'll celebrate the modern India meeting modern Britain whilst conveniently ignoring the bits that don't fit the narrative. And perhaps that's just how diplomacy works. Perhaps I'm being naive to expect anything different. Perhaps in the real world of international trade negotiations, you hold your nose, shake hands with people whose policies you condemn in any other context, and secure the economic advantage because that's what national interest demands. But let's at least be honest about what we're doing. Let's not dress it up as some grand partnership of equals sharing democratic values when we're clearly willing to overlook quite significant departures from those values when there's money on the table. The senior UK official described this as a real signal of modern India meeting modern Britain, adding there's so much more potential. This is just the beginning. And they're right. There's enormous potential. India's trajectory is remarkable. The opportunities for British businesses are genuinely substantial. But modern Britain also means something, doesn't it? Or at least it's supposed to. It means standing up for detained citizens. It means not turning a blind eye when a trading partner bankrolls a regime waging an illegal war. It means asking difficult questions even when the answers might complicate a lucrative deal. Sir Keir Starmer faces Narendra Modi today for face-to-face talks. Putin will likely be on the agenda, apparently. Jagtar Singh Johal's case will presumably be raised at some level or another. And then both leaders will smile for the cameras, announce how successful this mission has been, talk about the strength of UK-India relations, and move on. The posters will come down. The trade delegates will fly home. The 7,000 jobs will gradually materialize, we hope, and we'll all pretend that the moral compromises underpinning this entire arrangement are just the pragmatic cost of doing business in the 21st century. Maybe they are, but we should at least acknowledge the price we're paying. So there you have it. Trade deals, strategic silences, and uncomfortable questions that won't quite go away no matter how many billboards you put up. Stay with British Connors because, trust me, we're only just getting started unpacking the contradictions at the heart of British foreign policy. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one. Because let's be brutally honest about what we're discussing here. The government is promising funding for strengthened border security in Kosovo, law enforcement training, and cyber defense bolstering. These are medium to long-term capacity building initiatives. They're about training personnel, improving infrastructure, enhancing coordination between agencies. They are worthy goals, certainly, but they are not going to stop a single boat from leaving French shores next week. They are not going to prevent the 35,000 crossing this year. They are not going to mollify voters in coastal communities who watch dingers arrive with clockwork regularity. The political pressure on this government isn't operating on the timeline of institutional reform in the Western Balkans. It's operating on the news cycle, on the monthly Home Office statistics, on the visible, tangible sense that Britain's borders are not under control. And there's another element to this that's worth scrutinizing. The Foreign Office is redeploying staff to focus more heavily on migration, including on progressing negotiations with other countries to return people with no right to remain in Britain. This is significant. This tells you that Whitehall is being reorganized around this issue. Resources are being shifted. Diplomatic bandwidth is being redirected. The machinery of government is being reconfigured because the current approach demonstrably isn't delivering results. When you start redeploying Foreign Office staff en masse to work on migration returns, you're essentially admitting that your existing structures and strategies have been insufficient. It's a tacit acknowledgement of failure dressed up as proactive policy adjustment. Cooper's rhetoric is instructive as well. She says, international cooperation is vital to boosting our economic growth, protecting our national security, and securing our borders. The partnerships we build abroad make us stronger here at home. Notice the sequencing there. Economic growth first, national security second, border security third. That's deliberate. She's trying to situate migration policy within a broader framework of national interest, making the case that these investments aren't just about stopping boats, but about Britain's overall strategic posture. And then she adds, the support that we are giving our partners in the Western Balkans to tackle people smuggling will have a direct impact on the supply chains and profits of organized immigration crime networks, and reducing the threat that they represent to the UK. Supply chains. Profits, organized crime networks. She's borrowing the language of counterterrorism and serious organized crime, which again elevates the issue and frames it as something requiring sophisticated, intelligence-led, international responses rather than simply more patrol boats in the channel. But here's what Cooper isn't saying, and what's conspicuously absent from this entire initiative. Where are the bilateral returns agreements? Where are the safe third country designations? Where is a deterrent? Because fundamentally, if you're a migrant or a people smuggler calculating risk versus reward, the risk side of that equation hasn't meaningfully changed. Yes, there might be slightly better trained border guards in Kosovo in 2 years' time. Yes, there might be improved intelligence sharing between Balkan states and EU agencies. But at the ultimate destination, Britain, remains accessible, and if removal prospects remain vanishingly low, then the calculus doesn't shift. The flow continues. 18 returns out of 34,000 arrivals tells you everything you need to know about the deterrent effect of current policy. There's also the matter of European cooperation, which is genuinely complex. France, Germany, and Italy are attending this summit, and their interests don't necessarily align neatly with Britain's. France wants Britain to take more asylum seekers under formal burden-sharing arrangements. Germany is grappling with its own migration pressures and political fractures. Italy has been experimenting with controversial offshore processing schemes. The idea that these nations, plus the Western Balkan states with their own European integration aspirations and challenges, are going to seamlessly coordinate on migration control is optimistic at best. International cooperation sounds marvelous in a press release. The implementation is where things get messy, where national interests diverge, where funding commitments don't translate into operational effectiveness, where political will evaporates when domestic audiences start asking questions. And let's talk about Hillsborough Castle for a moment, because venue choice matters in politics. Hillsborough was where the Good Friday Agreement was negotiated, where seemingly intractable conflicts were resolved through painstaking diplomacy. By choosing this venue, Cooper is making a symbolic statement. Complex international problems can be solved through patient engagement, through bringing parties together, through finding common ground. It's a message of statesmanship and seriousness. But the Good Friday Agreement took years of negotiation, multiple near collapses, immense political courage, and a genuine alignment of interests among parties that had compelling reasons to reach a settlement. Does that same dynamic exist with Western Balkan migration routes? It's questionable. The symbolism is powerful, but symbolism doesn't stop boats.